friends. This is Jesse Juarez, president of the Rotary Club of sunny Seaside, California. You're watching a presentation which was recorded live at one of our club meetings. Seaside Rotary meets twice a month via Zoom. Our meetings feature dynamic presentations by many of the movers and shakers that make Monterey County such a vibrant and hardworking community. If you'd like to join a meeting or learn more about Rotary and the work that we do, you can reach out to Seaside Rotary Club at gmail.com. Again, that's Seaside Rotary Club at gmail.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more dynamic content. And then I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Steve McShane, who's going to introduce our esteemed guest.
Yeah, today's speaker is really going to be of great interest. She's someone I've followed for many years, both in public and private practice, more than 25 years. Litigation work, and I have to say, some of the best work in land use. I think back to the time at Fora that our speaker served, navigating some of the most complicated state, federal, and local call it bureaucracy to bringing about a better use to what used to be Fort Ord. Here at the city of Seaside, a more recent full-time city attorney post dating back just over a year. No doubt that the role of a city attorney is one that's not only fascinating but complicated. As we were joking at the start of the meeting, not representing any individual, the public, but certainly the best interests of boards, commissions, the city council, and certainly the city. It's going to be a very interesting talk today as we better come to understand our city attorney, her journey, but most importantly of all, the city of Seaside and the role of the city attorney for the city. So please help me in welcoming Sheri Damon as our speaker today.
Thanks, Steve, for that wonderful introduction. And yes, so I thought I would start the presentation today with my journey. And this is the boring part of the presentation, by the way. But I've been an attorney since 1993. And I know some of you will be very surprised to know that I am actually a graduate of Monterey College of Law. So I am locally grown in the attorney realm inside of the county of Monterey. And from that graduation, I had a great experience at Monterey College of Law. And I worked for a lawyer in Santa Cruz while I was going to law school. So my first year of law school, I had my daughter, and which, as you can imagine, adds a little extra layer of complication to your life. You've got this little baby, you're trying to keep all the balls in the air, do a good job on the mom side, do a good job and studying in the law school side. And you know what? In retrospect, that well prepared me for what life is as a lawyer, because I can certainly say all those balls are still in the air, and my daughter is long since out of the house, adult, gone through high school, college, and it doesn't seem to get any less busy. So after graduation, I went to work for the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. It was one of my first jobs, formal jobs, along with Monterey County Council. And I did that for a couple of years. So that was my introduction to the FORA process. That was back in 1998. So it was a long time ago that I did that. And then I ended up leaving Fort Ord Reuse Authority, and the county council's office, and went into private practice at Lombardo and Gillis, which many of you may know who've been around for a while. Lombardo and Gillis is no longer in business as Lombardo and Gillis, but they were a very well-respected land use law firm, and they represented many of the interests in Monterey County, from the agricultural communities in the central Salinas Valley to the Pebble Beach folks, Tehama, and other things on the coast. So both sides of Monterey County were brought into my purview. And it was a fabulous experience because I got to see from some really experienced folks how to process land use applications, which is very different from litigating um, environmental documents. And I also represented developers who we would go through and push through, work through the issues that faced developers in terms of making the development happen, from the initial financing, planning, environmental review, to the post entitlement process, which involves quite a few I dotting and T crossing to make sure that the things that everybody said they wanted to have happen actually happen and get implemented and put on the ground. So that was very instrumental for me. And I represented developers on Fort Ord because that was a place where I had lots of experience. But I also represented people in King City and in Salinas and in other areas, and both private residential developers and commercial developers. After that, I went into sole practice. I hung a shingle out. I decided the economy had gone down, land use wasn't quite the same. And I went and hung a shingle out at my house, and I took some clients with me and was involved in water adjudication cases. So I got some really great water law experience. I wouldn't say expert, but suffice it to say that um, I became very familiar with the Seaside Basin adjudication, the water master, the water management district, and some of my clients were on the receiving end of perhaps some bureaucratical processes that I did not think were appropriate, and I argued vigorously for those clients in that role, to again get those projects up and going. And I also was able to have some experience with the Coastal Commission. So Coastal Commission is an entity unto itself, and very powerful agency, state agency. And it really almost does take a lawyer to navigate through the Coastal Commission processes and how to negotiate with them and get projects to a point, negotiate and draft conditions of approval that are acceptable both from their administrative hat as well as from the development side of things. Then, because life was not complicated enough being a sole practitioner, I decided I was going to go back to public practice. And I ended up taking a position with the county council in Merced. And you would think, so far, she's got all this land use, water, she's over there doing land use stuff. No, I decided I wanted to be in court more. And so I took a child welfare position, and I litigated on behalf of the county human services agency, the removal of children from their families. And I did that for 4 years. I was in court every day. I did over 3,000 appearances a year, and from all aspects of the removal of children from their a bad situation, an unsafe situation, to reunifying those children, to sometimes going through the adoption process. And that is a very draining assignment. You see people at their worst. You sometimes see social workers at their worst in terms of the judgmental side of things sometimes, in terms of trying to harmonize that. And as a lawyer, you walk a very fine line between the law and the discretion in the judgment. And so in any case, I did that for 4 years. And then I decided, well, it's time to go back to FORA. They need help. And so I went back to the Fort Ord Reuse Authority in 2016. And as their prevailing wage coordinator, that's the position they had available. And that quickly transmuted into helping try to draft transition documents, trying to figure out what's going to happen out there with this agency that's been around for a very long time, trying to heard the varying competing interests out there, because every jurisdiction has a slightly different interest in what they wanted to see happen with the transition of the Fort Ord Reeves Authority. And then after we did the first transition plan resolution, I moved on to the next thing. And the next thing was Don Freeman hired me as the assistant city attorney in Seaside. And he said, Seaside's getting ready to get this big chunk of land out there. Might make sense. I know you're a really great attorney. I need an assistant. Will you come work for us? And that is how I ended up at Seaside. And thankfully, I went through the application process, and did a competition with others who would have liked to have been the city attorney when Don Freeman retired. And I was lucky to be selected by my 5 bosses, 3 of whom are on this call today. So thank you to them for that decision. And so I took the city attorney's position when Don finally retired on January 1st, 2020. He wanted to make sure that as the assistant, that I had excellent training on, from his hat, the expectations of what a city attorney is supposed to do. And I cannot say enough about the training and the mentorship that I received from Don. His shoes are ginormous to fill, and I benefited greatly. And I think the city overall benefited greatly from his tutelage of me as the working into the city attorney role. And so that brings me to January 1st, 2020. That's how I got to the city attorney spot. And then, things were going along okay. And then COVID hit. And then boom, Don forgot to tell me about the emergency and the urgency ordinances and the pandemic, and how do you craft these solutions? So alas, in we go, both feet into the fire, trying to figure out how to make sure we have the appropriate declarations in place to qualify the city for the FEMA funds that we want, and then all the other powers and duties and things that go hand in hand with that. And there are lots of urgency proclamations and ordinances that you may have observed over time, from extending landlord-tenant protection, suspending the state rules, and having a citywide protection of renters inside the city of Seaside, to closing City Hall, to I can't even, there are just so many little ones, to parking, to curbside pickup, and trying to hit the right balance of items, to enabling an RV parking area for our citizens who live in their RVs. And so those are all things that came up during my surprise, my 3rd month on the job, barely getting my feet wet, and then bam, all these additional things that came up. And so far, I think we've done okay. But so you might ask, what does a city attorney do? Well, I write urgency ordinances, because we just talked about that. But I sort of categorize it as three or four big picture things. I do transactional work. So I review contracts and resolutions and ordinances. I write ordinance sometimes. Sometimes I'm reviewing things that another staff person has put together. Every department has areas under their responsibility that they go and negotiate. And my responsibility is to usually review all those and give them my legal advice on how to make that the most defensible contract, the most beneficial contract for the city of Seaside. And does that mean everything is perfect all the time? Plug your ears, my bosses. It doesn't mean it's perfect all the time, but what it does mean is we've minimized the risk as much as we can using the evaluation. If you have a $5,000 contract and you're negotiating for 3 months because you want to be litigating the case in California, that is something that city attorneys would like to see. but the amount of time, effort, and energy to try to negotiate over a $5,000 contract would probably be $10,000. So there's some of that kind of judgment and discretion that goes into the city attorney's job as we are looking and reviewing certain kinds of contracts. So part of those negotiations might also include negotiating for properties or reviewing a land sale transaction. And up until about August of 2020, we had an economic development person who was primarily responsible for those kinds of negotiations with our city manager. And when that person departed the city, my bosses said, Sheri, you know what? Get in there and get going. And so I added some additional negotiation to my palette of things that I do. And we successfully completed a couple of negotiations that had been started and needed to be wrapped up. One of those is nurses barracks. So we have 40 apartments, affordable apartments coming online, hopefully this year. Mr. Al Glover Enterprises was a party that was going to reuse those. And that was one, or the Home Depot parking lot. It's another one. So sometimes the city attorney gets called in to do things that maybe is not 100% legal, but it's legal in the sense that we're negotiators. So, we have a very broad ability to do lots of different things. So sometimes that's part of the transactional negotiation thing. Then there's the advisory part of the work that I do, which is I get to give you my 2 cents, my advice on where you are, either with respect to a policy or whatever. You can take my advice or you can leave my advice. And hopefully you take my advice. I try to give reasoned opinions, and I have relationships, and I intentionally work on my outreach to each and every one of our council people. So just to make sure that I can give the best possible advice and understand some of the considerations that are being thought about as problems are coming down and approaching the city. It's just a part of that preparation and training to do your very, very best to give the city the very best advice that you can give. And then the third big picture category of things that I do are litigation. And litigation might be something like defending a decision that the city council has made. So you may have read in the paper about the Campus Town lawsuit. And there were a couple of different Campus Town lawsuits. And I'm pleased to announce to this group, and if you've read the weekly, you already know this, that the city was successful in what they call a demur, in getting the Campus Town lawsuit dismissed. And it was dismissed not just because they'd tried some legal shenanigans that didn't pan out, but the court also declared that it was a sham pleading with respect to the lawsuit that they brought against the city, which meant that it had no basis in law to bring that lawsuit. And that is a really important thing in the overall grander scheme of things. It's not okay. That's something that can lead to attorney's fees and some other things that go hand in hand with a lawsuit being declared a sham pleading. It means it's not your First Amendment right. It is not defensible in any way. It was not an appropriate lawsuit. So that's one area of litigation. On the other hand, I was just in court a couple of days ago on a matter where I'm bringing suit on behalf of the people of Seaside to close a drug house, and working through those kinds of issues and trying to position that case so that the neighbors in that area will finally have some peace from what's been going on, the terror of having a drug house in that neighborhood. And it's not resolved yet, and it's still got a road to go. I can't really talk about all the technical details of that. Just suffice it to say that that's kind of the breadth So when you talk about the city attorney prosecuting something, literally the name of the lawsuit is People ex relative Sheri Damon, city attorney on behalf of the people of Seaside versus the drug house people. And so it's, you know, like I said, I could be a defendant or I can be a plaintiff. We've got a very broad range, and that's not to say your city attorney is necessarily, I want to litigate. I mean, I enjoy court. I really do. But really, you have to be smart and strategic about how you do that because litigation's expensive. And I've always got my head up to look for, you know, whether or not there are other ways to resolve matters besides litigation, short of litigation. But I am definitely not afraid to litigate, in case anybody's worried about that. And then kind of overarching that whole thing are the rest of the story. And the rest of the story might be things from developing city attorney. You know, this is the first year, or now I'm in the beginning of the second year, that Seaside has had an in-house city attorney. And that is an adjustment for everyone. It's an adjustment for the city. They've always had an outside city attorney, meaning the attorney is usually outside of the office and already has an office set up. And things operate differently in a private attorney's office than they do when you have a public agency attorney. So that is kind of the rest of the story is education and getting the city attorney's office set up inside the city's four walls to respond to things like putting timesheets in, putting your time in, how you track your time is different, how the interaction with the other city departments work, being available, doing those kinds of things, which is one of the reasons why an in-house city attorney was really a desirable characteristic is because of that ability for people who are inside City Hall to just, hey, Sheri, hi, hey, you know, I have this question. Being able to answer those things on the fly and help give that advice and guidance at the earliest possible opportunity. So setting up that office, developing those relationships and how it works inside the office. That's part of the other story. And I know Mr. Miller will ask me about this because he's been asked that daily text, Steve, that you've been sending Alex. Alex pretty much does to me, but not on a daily basis, on trainings for boards and commissions. And so I have some trainings on boards and commissions that's almost complete and ready to go. But might also have heard that at my last city council meeting, I think it was the last one, either one or two ago, so many. My assistant was Dominique Davis, and Dominique was a part-time assistant, and she was great. She worked with Michael Hulmard at the Fort Ord Reese Authority, so I know Dominique and have worked with Dominique before. And when the opportunity came available, I took her under my wing and was training her to do some legal assistance type work. And she decided she really wanted to be a city clerk. And guess what? She got that. So I am so proud of Dominique on that front because that's really what she wanted to do. And it's a full-time position. But what that leaves me with is I don't have an assistant. So the council graciously just approved a full-time legal assistant for me. So I will be having my head up and out there. Keep your eyes out for the recruitment for somebody to help support the city attorney in moving forward because I seem to be not short on things to do in my office. And as you can tell, I'm a trained professional. So I can talk for probably like an hour on end without even inhaling. I know you're astounded by that, but I see that there are about 6 questions in the chat box. So I'm happy to take a inhale and an exhale here and see if I can answer some of these questions, if that's okay.
Greatly appreciated there, and definitely kudos to the work that you do, and just the amount of complications you have to deal with that your office has to deal with on a daily basis. So greatly appreciate your dedication there. And I think my colleague, Miss Lisa Sani, is going to go ahead and read off some of the questions there. Lisa, if you would.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm going to start with a personal question a bit. Sherry Hasty had asked that you had lost your home during the fires, which many of us know in this community. And Sherry extended her sorrow about that, and just wanted to know how you're doing now and how the permit process is. No, I added that in after the conversation yesterday.
Well, actually, thank you so much for asking, Lisa. I actually got really great news this morning, and I will say that losing your house is never an easy thing. Um, it was been particularly hard on my daughter, who was living at my house from day to day. I was very fortunate because I was strongly encouraged to buy a house in Seaside when I became the city attorney. So I had been looking for a house, and at the end of January, I was fortunate to find a house, and I bought a house, a small house in Seaside, like many of the houses in Seaside, about 1,000 square feet, 1 bathroom, tiny lot. And I was very happy. And then the fire happened in August of last year. And now I have my daughter and her refugee kitties with me, my doggies with me, and we're crammed into a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. And it's been an educational process from there on out. All I can say is losing your home and going through the bureaucratic process of a phase 1, phase 2 process will make me a better city attorney, because I have been on the receiving end of many, many bureaucratic processes and frustrations. And I am sure there will be more to come. But the little piece of golden good news that I got is, before you can proceed in Santa Cruz with applying to rebuild your house, you have to get something called a pre-clearance. And for the privilege of getting a pre-clearance, where they look at, fire, water, septic, because I live out in the country, and geotechnical. So before you can even apply, you have to get clearance on all those areas. And I just learned this morning that I made it through that hoop. So yay me. That was a huge thing for me. So that pushes me to the next phase, which is I got to light a fire under my architect to get him to finish the plans and the civil engineer. So again, part of my job is to negotiate and push and get all those things going. And all I can say is the people in Seaside will be benefited, because I'm not likely to be pushing forward any bureaucratic process that really is not for a really great reason in terms of protecting health safety. So as those items come up, just understand that my personal experience will very likely, and I know my bosses know this, will very likely guide some of my response back and how I'm approaching some of these problems coming forward. So I don't want to go too far down the rebuild, because I could talk for hours about that. And there are a lot of other questions here that I'm sure you're very interested in. But thank you so much for asking.
Well, we're glad you got that next step. Another question: you've held many different roles and positions within the legal world here locally, for the most part, other than Merced, it sounds like. What are the 1 or 2 things you like most about being city attorney now?
I was one of those kids. I love speed chess, and I love being busy, and I like the diversity of different kinds of problems. And I think that's one of the things that I really love about being city attorney is I can be all over the board. And I really pride myself. And if you get to go to the city attorney's webpage, I do have a webpage on the city's website. You can ask questions and different kinds of things to see how broad that is. But I love interacting. Don't always enjoy the political parts of that, but I enjoy the politics in general. The overall process and interaction is fascinating, and it's a never-ending educational, um, both intellectually stimulating and just overall stimulating on the brain cells. My brain cells will be firing for a very long time, I suspect. So I don't know if that's a direct answer, but there you go.
I think so. And we agree with you. I think there are lots of challenges ahead as well as great opportunity for Seaside. Question from Mr. Miller. Since the city has a relationship with CSUMB, how is the city of Seaside's relationship with your alma mater, Monterey College of Law?
Actually, that's a very great question. Thank you so much, Mr. Miller. I enjoy very good relationships with both. Mitch Winnick was one of my supporters when I was admitted to the United States Supreme Court. So I am admitted to all the courts in the United States. Not all the district courts. You have to apply for each district court, but all the ones, in California up to the Supreme Court, and then the Ninth Circuit, and then the United States Supreme Court. So he was one of my supporters on those applications. You have to have other people support. And then I also have been in contact with him about ways that the Seaside City Attorney's Office might either teach class or utilize interns to do certain kinds of things. And that's, as you can tell, because I'm a one-person city attorney's office, the city has some rules and regulations about how internships can be brought in. Interns can be brought into the overall umbrella of the city. So there's some issues to be worked out there, but certainly I've made some outreach there and am considering how a discrete project might be made available, and or I can teach a class and do some other engagement over there. So we're working through some of those issues. And luckily for me, CSUMB was on the Fort Ord Reese Authority board, and I worked closely with President Ochoa and his upper level administration on various issues that face the university. Even though early in my career, when I worked for the Fort Ord Reese Authority, the Fort Ord Reese Authority sued the university because the university just wanted to override all the impacts to the local communities. And many of you might not know, but coming out of that decision were some of the metrics that were used where CSUMB actually paid into the region to address habitat mitigation, for example. They have metrics about how to gauge how the development at CSUMB, as it grows larger and larger, the kind of impacts on the roads and the surrounding roads. Those numbers are reported, and they all come from the resolution of a lawsuit that I was involved in very early on in my career with FORA. So not sure if that answers the question. So even though with that lawsuit was there, I still enjoy a good relationship with CSUMB. They don't hold it against me. That's good.
I think our mayor is also on their board of directors for Monterey County College of Law. Excuse me, Monterey College of Law. I sometimes want to put that county in there. Another question: what are some of the biggest challenges to taking on the drug houses or locations known to be problematic to that particular neighborhood?
Right. So, as you can imagine, we have a powerful tool in the Health and Safety Code with respect to closing drug houses. But in order to get there, you have to have a lot of proof, and there are multiple issues that can arise. So just having a simple substance abuser in a house may not be enough. You want to have a history of law enforcement reports. You need to build the proof to support the case, because when we use the statutes under the Health and Safety Code, if we go all the way through the court process, it's a mandatory boarding up of a house. And if you think about that and take a step back, yes, it addresses one issue in terms of the substance abuse and maybe the drug activity in the neighborhood on the one hand. On the other hand, it takes a house, a residence, out of commission for somebody else to live in, or for somebody to live in. So there's always a balance, I think, that we're walking as we go through, because at the end of the day, the goal is not to have the drug activity in our neighborhoods, and for our neighbors and our neighborhoods to be safe, to feel safe, for our residents to be housed, and to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Some of the other issues that come up, though, are we have cases where we don't always have that level of proof yet. We have cases where there are owners that may have passed away, and maybe the kids are living in the house. So that is a unique issue that is very difficult to resolve. We are getting ready to try to position, I'm just looking really for the right case to position the use of a legal tool called a receivership, where the court actually appoints a receiver and takes over a property. And I know that sounds really bad, and they make improvements to the property. And then if the owner or the person with the interest can buy back in, has the wherewithal, they can do that. But if they can't, then the property is sold and the improvements are paid for. And so the city it's a win because the properties are improved. The owner can be a win if they don't have the ability to maybe step up to the plate to do what they need to do to make sure that the residence is safe. And it doesn't have to be, it's not limited to just a residence. It can be a nuisance property that needs to be abated on the commercial side. But those are some tools that I would expect to see as we move forward on some of the most egregious situations inside the city of Seaside. So if you ever see anything or have an issue with a location you think that might be, you can always email city attorney at ci.seaside.ca.us. It doesn't mean necessarily it will get prosecuted, but it definitely puts it on my radar to, see what I have in terms of my background, the background and the proof that we have in our other city departments, because sometimes it doesn't always make it to the city attorney's office. So I just encourage people to go ahead and reach out. And again, no promises, but I definitely will take a look at it. Oh, you're mute.
Thank you. I can't get through a whole meeting without that, right? Where would you rank the top 3 sources of liability for the city? How is the city protected? Is it insurance?
Yeah, so in terms of liability, probably personal injury, trip and falls, and maybe some potentially personnel issues out there would be the potential areas where we would have the most liability. City of Seaside participates in a joint powers insurance pool. It's called the Cal JPIA. And so for most everything, the city is insured. There are certain things like the CEQA cases. City does not have insurance for those kind of litigation matters, but the city attorney's office litigates those, and sometimes I have to go out and hire special counsel because there's just me. But for most of the things that face the city, we have an insurance pool. And for development projects, we have reimbursement agreements that require developers usually to indemnify the city for certain types of litigation. So that's not a big thing, but there are other ones. We are anticipating some litigation coming out of a contract that will not have insurance. And we'll see how that goes. And the drug house litigation, usually the city is fronting the money for the litigation. And then as we get judgments against that the statutory authority provides for recovery of attorney's fees and costs from the property on those drug houses. So we try very hard to make sure that I'm pushing causes of action where I'm likely to be reimbursed or have the city be reimbursed for our legal costs.
Great. We have one more question in the chat box, and that should put us right around perfect timing, my guess would be. And we can't do without a water question, can we? With as much experience as you have with the history of water on the peninsula, what do you see in the future? If and when Cal-Am gets bought, do you think there will be lawsuits?
Well, I think that's kind of an easy question. I can't go out there too far and say, what do I envision the future on it? Because really it's water. Nobody really knows what the future of water will be. I can tell you there will definitely be lawsuits. There are lawsuits now, not just with Cal-Am, also with Marina Coast Water District, on water and water related issues. I know this from Seaside's hat, though. From Seaside's hat, every drop of water, every water project out there is one that the city will need to move forward doing what we want to do. And until we are in control of our water destiny, we will be hindered in what we can do out there. At the end of the day, in order to develop, in order to flesh out or even go up, you need to have water resources to be able to do that. And you need to have a water project to do that. What that water project is, I don't know. And if I had a crystal ball, I'm sure everybody would pay me a lot more money. Yeah, I probably wouldn't be a city attorney because, the water crystal ball would put me in really good stead. But unfortunately, there are a lot of politics involved with the making of water in Monterey County, and it's been like that for a very long time. And in fact, you know what? At the end of the day, water is one of those things. That's why Mark Twain said, whiskey's for drinking and water is for fighting. And, like I said, I have been lucky in my career to be involved in a lot of different water type issues from the Central Valley, where routine water mitigation banking was happening probably 20 years ago or more. They've been water banking for a very long time, to the state water project and the federal water projects, where many farmers along that Highway 46 corridor over there to Bakersfield were selling their water rights off property and fallowing property in order to maximize their most valuable crop, which was water, and their water allocations. So to over here, where we have problems with our groundwater and we have a hard time capturing the water that goes out to the ocean, and figuring out how to do that in a sustainable, affordable, I'm gonna say affordable, but let's just face it, the affordability of water will not be what we see today. We have been recipients of very inexpensive water, and solutions to the water problem will not be necessarily inexpensive. So I don't know if that answers everybody's questions, but without going, I don't know the timing, and I don't know, how it will end up working out. I just know that we need something to work out. We Seasiders need some water projects to work out, whether it's Monterey One reclaimed water and expansion, whether it's a desals plant by Cal-Am, whether it's an inside a Seaside project, I don't know. But one of them, or maybe more than one of them, need to happen in order for us to be sustainable and move forward.
Great. Thank you so much for answering the questions and being so informative. And I'll pass it back to Jesse.
Oh, sorry about that there. Hey there. And you know, I think if we have a few more minutes, we might have room for one last question here. Looks like this came in the chat box comments, and I don't know how complicated this might be, but back to the nuisance property, is it anything similar to eminent domain? Even though the city may go in and make some improvements, does the owner get to keep some kind of return for the property value?
Yeah, so on the receivership, I understand receivership is very complicated, and I think that's what the question is referring to, because I had referred to receivership. Yes, the way that works is, or the concept is that the property pays for the improvements. So anything above and beyond that goes back to the property owner. So after the costs of the receiver and the costs of the improvement, whatever is left goes back to the owner. And sometimes there have been situations, again, not in the city of Seaside, it's not a tool that the city has really used very frequently, but there are and could be some circumstances and more that I've seen as I've been looking at different properties where I might be advising that we use that tool, because in many cases it's a win-win. Either the heirs can't do what they need to do to maintain or market the property appropriately, and the city wins because the city gets a piece of property that gets upgraded. So in many ways it's a win-win. Maybe not exactly how the heirs or the prior property owner wants to win, but it's a way to try to balance the needs of an active and growing city, and what we want to see as our community goes forward. So yeah, it's not quite it's kind of like eminent domain, but not quite. You get, there's a lot of proof that you have to show to put a property into receivership.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that information there. And I think we're at 12:54. I think we gotta go ahead and close up the Q&A session. Sheri, thank you. Thank you so much, not just for answering our questions, but for being here today, for all the hard work that you and your office does. I mean, I think it's clear to anyone that there's no easy answers with a lot of these decisions and bureaucratic or otherwise, but we appreciate having individuals like you in place to navigate that and make sure that we get the fairest, the most fair result possible. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone. Now I'm going to go ahead and end the recording function right now.